Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to South Texas Crossfire. I'm your host. Welcome back from a brief break, Joe Flores, and we have on a very special guest. I know he's very busy. I appreciate his time, and that's our Nueces County Sheriff, Jim Kaelin. How are you?
Joe, good to be with you again.
Well, thanks. It's been a couple of years, 3 years in fact,
Boy.
and time flies. But thank you for everything you're doing for the community. You're one of the most liked sheriffs that we've ever encountered, and so we're very proud to have you on and everything you're doing. Let's start out with this. Before we started interviewing, you talked about the jail is not the solution. What did you mean by that?
Well, you know, it's a jail is basically a house full of a lot of innocent people because they stand accused of a crime but not convicted of a crime. And thus, what we're warehousing in most county jails are people who are awaiting trial. A few of the people in jail are awaiting transfer off to the penitentiary.
Catch chain, as they say.
You catch a chain and go out the door and begin to repay their debt to society. But a jail is for a sheriff, we are holding and housing people standing accused of crimes but not convicted of a crime. Now that's there's a huge difference there in that definition from penitentiary. Everybody in the penitentiary has been convicted through our criminal justice system. But in jails, no.
As a lawyer, I never even thought about it that way. And I know they're presumed innocent, but a lot of people also think a jail, they must have done something if they're in jail.
And the mindset is, the mindset of a community is, you know, thank goodness for jails, let's lock them all up and we won't have any problems on our street and so forth.
But what's the reality?
And I would go with that, except it doesn't work.
And why doesn't it work?
It does not work. Because the recidivism, the rate of incarceration hasn't dwindled, the rate of incarceration has grown. I've got over 40 years in law enforcement.
Yes, sir.
And when you continue to do things the same way, expecting different results, and we've heard this analogy before, but when you continue to do things expecting different results and you don't get the different results, why do we continue to do the same thing, expecting different results? For example, you know, 80% of my population in that jail, and I'm being conservative when I say 80%, are a drug-related offense. You have people up there accused of using small amounts of marijuana, using other scheduled prohibited drugs that are put into the system merely for the drug use. All right? Our society has placed a heavy burden and a heavy penalty for people who use drugs on a scheduled drug list and violate the law. Well, when we talk about people in jail and the numbers, all right, if jail cured it, if jail fixed our problem, then let's continue doing what we do. But jail doesn't fix it. Joe, the only thing let's take alcohol. It's a drug. Alcohol's a drug. If you have an alcoholic who goes into jail because he's been picked up driving under the influence, and he eventually, let's say he's convicted, if you haven't taken care of his problem, whatever his problem is that causes him to drink in excess, the society is still faced with the same problem. And that door's going to swing right back around, and here he comes. The only time you have any relief is while they're in jail. My position as a sheriff is, of course, I don't put them in jail, and I don't have the authority to release people from jail. That all comes under the judicial branch of government. The judges make those decisions. But we've got to change what we're doing today, and what we've been doing from the past 40 plus years of my career is not working. Small amounts of marijuana. To lock a person up for having a small amount of marijuana just it doesn't make sense. But yet we do it. We do it on a regular basis.
Even Rick Perry, our governor, said it's got to be decriminalized some way. Make them do community service or something.
Well, listen to your presidential candidates. Have you ever used drugs? And I think they've all said, well, yeah, I smoked a little bit, or I dabbled, experimented with drugs. Well, those were felony cases, and had they been caught, this presidential thing would have been over with.
You're right.
They would have been in jail. So the thing of it is, they went on to great careers and great lives, and they dabbled in drugs. I don't believe what we're doing is working. But it's costing our taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars annually because we lock up people for small amounts of marijuana. When I was a highway patrolman, a young guy, and I was out on the road, times were different. We'd catch kids with alcohol, we'd catch kids with marijuana, we'd catch kids with some pills. And we'd say, turn around and make it disappear. Am I really seeing what I see? And they dump their stuff out and come back and say, well, I thought there was something in there. I must have been a mistake. You need to go on and get your life in order and leave that stuff alone, And that don't happen anymore.
That doesn't.
Everybody is stuff and cuff, stuff and cuff, stuff and cuff. Arrest, incarcerate, convict. And once you've done that, you've created a second problem. Now that person's going to have to try to get employment somewhere. And because they've had a conviction with marijuana or a conviction with another drug, many doors get shut in their face. So, is there a solution? Absolutely, there's a solution. But is it one that our society is willing to take? We are beginning to just see footholds. We see out in Colorado where they have actually quasi-legalized marijuana, by saying for medicinal purposes, you can have small amounts of marijuana. In fact, we're even setting up stores controlled and run by government, the state, to dispense marijuana. It's still illegal on the federal side, but the feds are staying out of it and letting the state continue to do it. We got lots of people, probably, I'd hate to think of how many people from Texas are headed off to Colorado, to actually to go there to purchase their recreational, quote, drugs. We drink beer. We drink beer in large quantities, and we enjoy an adult beverage when we go out in the evening. It has its place. And I tell people it has its place because if you invite the sheriff to your party, and the sheriff comes in there in his adult mode, I'm not a very fun person to be around. But if I can put my adult to sleep for a little while and let my rebellious child come out to play, I'm fun and people want me around. That usually happens with a cocktail. Okay, right. The cocktail then says to the parent, step back, we're okay, the environment's all right. And look, Sheriff's a great guy. He's a fun guy to be around, especially when he's had a glass of wine.
Right.
But I don't lose fact that there's a responsibility with consuming those things. But Joe, basically, I know what we're doing is not working. Look at the drug cartels in Mexico. There is so much money, and this war on drugs here in the United States is a farce. You heard it. Not many people say that, especially a sheriff. The war on drugs is a farce. We're not winning. We're not winning, but we continue to pump more and more and more of our taxpayers' dollars into this war on drugs. And yet the results are the jails are packed. They're bulging at the seams. People are dying. People are getting shot on these illegal transactions. There needs to be some people that can sit down at a table and figure out a better way of handling things than what we're currently doing now. We need law enforcement. We need law enforcement to redirect themselves into things in our community that will make a difference. Originally, back in the Matt Dillon days, in the Matt Dillon days, his job was one to keep order. And where there was chaos and disorder, Matt Dillon would come in and recreate order. Everybody didn't go to jail, but order was the prevailing thought of the day. And in law enforcement work and in police work, there are so many times when we can recreate order out of disorder and make society well and make things well and make things better without trying to put somebody under arrest and lock them up in the jail. Every offense is not a jailable offense. I'm proud to say that along with the Corpus Christi Police Department, they're working on reducing the number of people that get arrested and placed in jail. You know, you being a lawyer, you know that police officers have no authority to jail people. They only have the authority to arrest and bring before a magistrate. And people go, what? Only to arrest and bring before a magistrate. But most magistrates are not available, and if they are, they're in jail. So police officers bring people to jail, and they have to wait for magistration in some cases. Not necessarily so here in Nueces County because we have full-time magistration, but after hours, there may not be one. And so here's a person that may or may not have, be guilty of any offense other than they got arrested, and they spend a day or 2 or 3 in jail waiting for that, quote, magistration and the setting of a bond. And the jail swell. I've been in the news recently because we've been furloughing people out of the jail under a federal court order that was given to the sheriff of Nueces County back in 1992. And I'm the only sheriff of 254 in the state of Texas that actually has federal authority to release inmates out of the county jail. And that order was signed by Judge Hayden Head, who just recently took full retirement from the federal bench. But
darn good judge, Hayden Head. I was in front of him for 13 years, and he knew a lot about brush country and cowboys. One time he told me, when you come back to my bench, I'm sorry, Judge, but that's the way you talk. When you come back to my bench, I want you to name all the 7 of the Magnificent 7. And don't use that little phone of yours either to find out. Well, I was horrified, and I had to go find out who all the Magnificent 7 were out of my head. And I came back. I said, I have 5. That's it. And but he's a very good judge, very compassionate. Sure. So when he signed that order, when Judge Hayden Head signed the order, what were the circumstances behind that?
Jail overcrowding. The jail was overcrowded.
He's a realist. That's
there was
sure.
A pro se petition filed by 40 inmates in the Nueces County Jail at the time that some were sleeping on floors. The sanitary conditions were bad, and the bottom line was that there was an agreement reached by the county folks. And
well, one thing that made him more angry than anything else were the human conditions of it all. And he knew I was from Fowl and Jim Wells County, Brooks, Jim Wells. Mm-hmm. And he would tell me, one time he asked me, Mr. Flores, why don't you tell everybody what the brush country is like over there, for these aliens and what they have to go through for 3 days. And would they give them a gallon of water and a few cans of potted meat, and then they wonder why they found them in mass graves in Brooks County. So the same thing in the jails. We're busting, as you said, at the seams. Why on earth what did it take a federal judge like Hayden Head to sign that order? What was happening before Judge Head signed the order on the furlough? And my hat's off to him. And to you for being the first of 254 counties.
People, you get used to certain steps of doing things, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and nobody begins to think, what can we do between 2 and 3 before we ever get to 4 that we can alleviate some of the overpopulation. He had the ability to see ahead and to see that a person who was not paying child support, all right, and we need to take care of that. But do we need to take care of that by having the individual locked up and confined in the jail? But they're confined in masses in the jail for not paying child support. Do we fix the not paying child support by locking them up? No, but we lock them up. There's got to be another program, and I'm not the person that's sitting at the table and trying to figure out what the problem is, but people need to come to the table and say, this is what we need to do. Another huge problem we have, we go through the court system, we convict somebody of an offense, and we send them to the penitentiary for 10 years. Okay, now they fall under a different jurisdiction, and there is a parole board, and after about, let's say, 5 years, they say, this person needs to be let out on parole, and we'll watch them and we'll monitor them. They come out, but again, they still have their same habits that they had before they ever went to jail, and they don't report. Well, when they don't report to their probation officer, there is a warrant issued by a parole board, which is not judicial. They're not representative of the people. They are appointed by a governor, and they're arrested and put back in jail, waiting a parole hearing.
It just doesn't make sense.
What?
It doesn't
They're
make
waiting
sense.
a parole hearing. Now, the county is having to fund incarceration of this individual again. We sent him to 10 years. We sent him off for 10 years. He did not reoffend in the public. He didn't reoffend. He violated a condition of his probation. I talked to Abel Herrero yesterday, and I said, we need to do something about this.
Our state rep.
We need to do something about it, and he's right there with me on it. He's not sure what the solution is legislatively, wise how we can fix it, but one thing we need to do is, if he violates a condition of his probation, Joe, send him back to the penitentiary and have your hearing up there.
Not for us to be paying.
Not here in Nueces County, where you're further bleeding off valuable resources that we need just to keep the infrastructure of our community vibrant and active. So we house him 3 months, 6 months, and what happens? He's incarcerated 6 months. Pro board finally gets around to having the hearing and says, okay, we're going to let you go back out. He just spent 6 months locked up on our dime in Nueces County, and they let him go anyway.
Well, the other thing I wanted to bring out is a lot of people don't know that when you go to jail, it's a jungle. When you go to prison, it was different from jail. And you learn how to survive. There's betrayal. There's jailhouse snitches. There's the culture there, either join in a gang or be a lone wolf and maybe be subject to prey, become the hunted. So, out of the hundreds, if not thousands of prisoners I've talked to, you don't learn much when you go to prison. So if you send a young man for marijuana, like you said, for use, and then you mix him in with a hardened thug that's, say, sitting in your jail, not any of your fault, waiting, it becomes a problem because you've got to segregate them out. Say if they were a gang member and things like that. It's not just putting people and housing them and busting at the seams, but don't you have to segregate certain groups?
We do in the jail. That creates the other problem for overcrowding. When I'm overcrowded, I have difficulty segregating the person that may hurt another person. We got to keep the gangs separated. We got to keep homosexuals separated from rednecks. We've got to keep child molesters segregated from those who would say, you don't have to wait to go to court. We're going to take care of you as soon as the lights go out up here. We have to keep that population, by jail standards, appropriately housed to ensure their safety. And that's tough. That's tough to do when you got crowded jails. To flip back on the drug part, did you know Bayer aspirin in the 19th century came out with a cough syrup that was heroin? Bayer aspirin
before
had
the
cough
Harrison
syrup.
Act.
Yeah, before they ever, and it didn't work.
But
the
sure made people feel good.
But people didn't care. Yeah, it did.
And got them addicted,
But you see, we've been there, and then we decided it became illegal. You can't use it. It's a dangerous drug, and it is. And it can be. But in all my 40 years of law enforcement, I never had to fight a person who was using heroin. But I'm going to tell you, everybody that got drunk on alcohol, everybody wanted to whip my butt, and it was a many fisticuffs just trying to get the person handcuffed and in the car. That never happened with heroin. They would take their heroin. The term in the drug culture was go on the nod, go back, leave me alone. I'm just going to, let the moment occur and go on. And today, and it's a good example. And today, how do we treat heroin addiction? If you get into a heroin addiction program, they give you methadone, which is a synthetic heroin, the same thing. And that person then, because of long-term use of heroin, they're taking heroin not to get high, they take heroin just to be normal. It doesn't produce the high anymore. The body says, well, he's not going to quit. And eventually that high comes down to they just want to be normal. If they don't get it, they drop down into the depression categories and the categories which make them do things, steal and break into places just to get the heroin. That we give methadone. That's a program that works. It's a program that works, and it makes a person able to go back and add something at least to society, because He goes to his methadone clinic, gets his methadone, and he's functional. And many employers probably don't even know that they have a person who is actually taking methadone because he's not getting high, he's just normal.
Well, zooming back a little bit, and I know this is a big one, is the drug cartels. We've got problems with huge gangs like MS-13 in South America and here. The people don't understand the exodus of the children from their countries over here, but a lot of it had to do with the drug gangs.
Yes.
And with the cartels, and Mexico too has its share. But nobody talks about the demand here. We consume.
It's us.
Yeah, we're the biggest consumer of cocaine in the world.
Yes.
We are the biggest consumer or top consumer of heroin and marijuana. And now, so if 80% of your population in the jail are drug users, not pushers, what would be, if you had the DEA budget, if you had $3 billion, Sheriff, what would you do differently with drug users?
Well, the whole system, Joe, has to be changed. If you're with DEA and you have the existing laws, there's got to be a congressional federal move to make drugs without the penalties, more instead of the incarceration, more of that money spent on the rehabilitation and getting people into a program that either gets them off drugs or at least provides a system of maintenance that they can function normally in our society. Locking them up in the jail prevents them from buying any additional drugs, but nothing, and they're not using while they're in jail. But the addiction does not leave them while they're in jail. As soon as they get out, they right back into the same program because they like the way the drug makes them feel. And if it wasn't for the good feeling that they get out of it, well, they wouldn't use it. Nobody's going to use anything that makes you throw up, get sick, and do all of those kind of things. It's a huge problem. I'm probably not going to live long enough to ever begin to see this thing corrected, but we're going to have to do something. The drug cartels in Mexico, if they ever get a foothold, truly a foothold in this country, like they have in Mexico, to where they say, Sheriff, if you continue to enforce those drug laws, you're going to see members of your family disappear. You're going to see many members of your family killed. And you say, get out of here, you can't intimidate me, and all of a sudden, here's a sheriff that loses 2 members of his family. And then they call back and say, you still going to push the issue, or are you ready to lose more?
Yeah.
That's what happens when the drug cartels get a hold of and move in and become powerful in our community. That scares me more than the drug itself.
Well, I'll be meeting with some members of Congress here in the Valley. I'm hoping that I can use this video. You mind if I show those congressmen? No, sir.
No. This is we got an open forum here, and a lot of it is my opinion. And but I think when you it's everybody has one, but my opinion is an educated opinion, and nobody can argue with the fact that we've been doing this for as long as we've been doing it. And it doesn't work. Why do we continue to do it? And that would be my question to any member of Congress, to any legislative body or committee, or to even at our state level. Why do we continue to do what doesn't work? Why aren't there smart enough minds to sit at the table and say, let's do this? Because jail doesn't work.
Sheriff Jim Kaelin, you've been hearing from him, Nueces County Sheriff, sharing a blockbusting opinion on the realities of incarceration, on mass incarceration of drug users. I'm going to be sending this out to organizations that keep a foothold on this and that are trying to end mass incarceration. Thank you, Sheriff, for coming out and sharing your candid opinions.
Joe, thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Very, very valuable.
Thank you. All right, that concludes our show, and you've been listening to your Sheriff, Jim Kaelin, here in Nueces County. Thank you for all you do and also the humane treatment of people in your jails. And when we next come back, we're going to also follow up on mass incarceration on a separate show. Thank you all for watching, and God bless.